Welcome to Forum 360. I'm Ardith Keck, your host today. Trees are very valuable on our property. We like our lawns to look beautiful and our plants to be healthy. We're talking today with R.J. Laverne, who is the Manager of Education and Training for Davey Tree Expert Company. I have lots of questions about protecting our landscape and keeping lawns green. Tell me about Davey Tree.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to talk about the company that I'm involved with, the Davey Tree Expert Company. So the Davey Tree Expert Company began in 1880 when a gentleman from England by the name of John Davey relocated to Ohio. And his first job when he came to Ohio was as the caretaker of Standing Rock Cemetery in Kent, which is still there. And at the time, the cemetery was rather run down. And John Davey, with his knowledge of plants and trees, revived the cemetery and made it beautiful and lush and green to the point where many of the residents of Kent were coming to the cemetery and asking John if he could help them with their own plants on their own residential properties.
So he thought of Davey Tree.
He did. So Davey Tree began as a one-man consulting company in 1880. And from there, his sons became involved with the company, and we've been growing ever since.
How does Davey Tree differ from other landscape companies and other tree services?
Well, I suppose you could look first at our history dating back to 1880. We are indeed the oldest tree care company in North America. And there's many tree care companies that are involved primarily with taking trees down, cutting trees down or pruning trees. Our company tends to like to keep trees in place, and certainly we are involved with pruning trees and removing trees when required. But we really focus on managing landscapes for the benefit of human beings. So we focus a lot of our attention and our knowledge on taking care of the trees and the shrubs and the other plants in landscapes, with the understanding of what your priorities are for your own residential property or for larger properties.
And you're nationwide?
We are. We are throughout the United States and Canada. So what began as a one-man consulting operation in nearby Kent, Ohio, has its branches, if you will, throughout the United States and Canada.
I guess that spells success.
It does indeed. We've been growing a lot, particularly over the last 38 years during our employee ownership phase of the company.
Who are your customers?
Well, we have 4 primary service lines within the Davey Tree Expert Company. And each service line focuses on a different set of clients. So, for example, our largest service line is utility services. And we work closely with utility companies throughout North America to help keep trees and utility power lines separated so that we help the utility companies provide safe, reliable electric service.
And when you have a storm, Davey Tree is out there?
We are very much out there, and storms can be very small scale local events, or they can be hurricanes or immense ice storms. And with the size of our company, we're able to efficiently move crews from one part of the country to another part of the country to respond to these major storm events. And that helps the utility companies get back up and running in a short amount of time.
Your home office is still in Kent?
It is in Kent, and that is where our corporate headquarters are. But we have offices throughout the United States and Canada. So the utility companies are of course spread throughout that area, but a second service line within our company is residential services. And as the name implies, we help residential property owners throughout North America take care of their trees, their shrubs, their lawns, their flowers around their houses. Yet a third service line within our company is called commercial landscape services. And as that name implies, we help commercial landscapes manage their properties. So for example, Arlington National Cemetery is one of our clients. And we help proudly maintain that cemetery, as well as a number of other national cemeteries throughout the United States. We manage golf courses, we help college campuses. Commercial services focuses on those commercial landscapes.
Now, as the commercial part of the operation, do you plant flowers and all of that?
We do. Everything from maintaining the largest of shade trees to planting the flower gardens and maintaining the turf. Anything that is green and alive on a property is under our watchful eye.
Let's go back to the essence of the beginning of Davey Tree. Were you always employee owned? I mean, I think that would be an unusual kind of company.
Yes. The majority of our tenure has been under the care of the Davey Company. So John Davey and his sons and relatives grew the company. But up until 1979, that was a pretty good model. In 1979, the Davey family decided to sell the company, and the employees of the company were interested in purchasing the company. So in 1979, the company became employee-owned, and for 38 years now, we've been growing as an employee-owned company.
Does that mean that you own a piece of the company?
I proudly own a piece of the company, and through a stock purchasing subscription plan, I take a little portion of my earnings every month and purchase a little bit more of the Davey Tree Expert Company.
Do you think that helps create a better company because people care?
I think you hit it right on the head. It does create a better company for a number of reasons, but it is that employee ownership in the sense that we all have skin in this game. We all have a responsibility to our company. So it is that sense of caring that makes us different and better because of that.
And you're ranked as special. You have a special ranking in Ohio?
We do. We are the largest employee-owned company in the state of Ohio, and the 13th largest employee-owned company in the United States. And the company, the management of the company really promotes ownership in our company and provides the employees with the ability to purchase stock at a reduced cost and over an extended period of time. So the company actually helps finance the employees in purchasing stock.
And what emphasis does Davey put on a healthy environment?
Well, we look at the healthy environment from a wide range of scales. So we might look at a residential property on that very small scale and think about their healthy environment, even at that small scale. So for example, a number of years ago, we pioneered a concept known as plant health care. And it works similar to how a person might visit their primary care physician on a regular basis, with the thought that if you keep your body healthy, eating correctly, exercising regularly, that you will be better off in terms of warding off illness and disease. So we think of landscapes in much the same way. If we plant the right tree or the right shrub in the right place, depending on the environmental conditions of that site, the pH of the soil, the structure of the soil, the amount of water that's available to the plants, if we match the plants to the site, then the plants will be able to thrive without a whole lot of extra fertilization, without application of pesticides. So matching the right plant to the right site is that first step in plant healthcare. And then, instead of simply treating a plant if it becomes infested with an insect pest or a disease, instead of simply looking at the plant and spraying a pesticide on it, for example, we look at the entire site and ask ourselves, is the insect on this plant really the problem, or is it a secondary condition? So for example, one of our clients had a problem with a yew shrub at the corner of their house. And every 2 or 3 years, the shrub would die, and they would replace it with another yew shrub, and that would last for a couple of years. And after the first year, insects would appear on the shrub. And so they had a consultant come in that would spray the shrub every year to kill the insects. Nevertheless, the plant would die. Well, eventually they called the local Davey office, and one of our arborists came on site, looked at the shrub. Sure enough, there are the insects. But instead of simply spraying the shrub to kill the insects, the arborist noticed that the downspout from the gutters on the house emptied right near the base of the plant. The real problem with the plant was not that the insects were eating the shrub. They were showing up because the shrub was stressed. The soil was too wet. And as the shrub became stressed, the insects moved in and took advantage of the situation. So our arborist suggested, instead of spraying the plant, why not get an extension to the downspout and direct the water away from the base of the plant?
Aha.
It improved the site conditions for the plant. The insects were warded off by the natural defense mechanisms of a healthy plant. Problem solved.
I was going to ask you if there are plants that love the wet.
There are
probably
indeed.
are.
There are plants that love the wet. There are plants that love to have dry feet. And there are plants that do well in alkaline soils, and there are plants that do well in acidic soils.
And do you offer services for ecological consultation as well?
We do. So the fourth service line, the one that I haven't visited yet, is called the Davey Resource Group. And the Davey Resource Group is stocked full of ecologists, biologists, wetland scientists, wildlife biologists, and we work closely with communities, with developers in identifying, for example, critical ecological habitats, wetlands, for example, or habitats that support wildlife species. So there's 2 species of bats that are endangered in this part of the country. Mm-hmm. So we have wildlife biologists that specifically go out and identify wildlife habitat that is critical to these endangered species. And so we help landowners and communities protect these vital ecosystems and preserve the habitat for those wildlife species.
We're talking today with R.J. Laverne, who is the Manager of Education and Training for Davey Tree Expert Company. And we're talking about lawns, and we're talking about trees and ecological help as well. Do you see changes in our environment as a result of what's happening in the world?
Yes, and some of those changes are for the better, and some of those changes, unfortunately, are for the worse. Some of the changes that we have seen over the past 30, 40, 50 years is an improvement in water quality. And that's due to people such as Rachel Carson that recognized back in the 1950s and 1960s that an awful lot of pesticides were being applied, mostly to agricultural plants, but also within landscapes. And those pesticides were getting into the soil, they were getting into the water, they were not only affecting the insects that they were targeting, but they were also getting into fish and therefore into birds such as eagles and hawks. And the overuse of pesticides was working its way throughout the environment. We do a much better job now of using pesticides in a much more targeted, much more restrictive way. Some of this has come about because of government regulation. Some of it has come about because scientists in government agencies and in companies such as Davey have recognized these concepts associated with plant health care. So those are good things that are happening. Some of the unfortunate things that happen are associated with climate change. So as climate change occurs, we're seeing more invasive species coming further and further north into North America. And whether those are invasive plants or invasive insects, we're seeing a movement of these invasive species because of climate change.
That's pretty sad. Emerald ash borer is one of those, I assume.
Emerald ash borer is one of those invasive insects that is a product of our globalization. So a number of invasive insects and invasive pathogens have come about because we've imported them unknowingly along with products that we import from other parts of the world. So emerald ash borer, for example, came in wood crates and pallet material that was imported from Asia. And the emerald ash borer hitchhiked in the wood that was in those pallets and crates and became established in our country.
Our neighborhood has been decimated because of the emerald ash borer, so I don't like it.
No, and we're seeing how quickly that insect can spread. And ironically, even though the insect is able to fly and spread on its own, the vast majority of transport of emerald ash borer has happened as the insect hitchhikes along when humans transfer wood products, like firewood, for example. Mm-hmm. So it arrived in our country as a hitchhiker on wood material, and it's continuing to spread within our country unknowingly as humans move wood.
What will happen with the trees? Will we be losing them all eventually, or are other trees more disease resistant or insect resistant?
Well, the spread of invasive insects has somewhat outpaced our native plants' ability to develop natural defenses. As time moves forward, we will, with human help, help our native trees and shrubs develop these natural defense systems. So over time, there will be trees that develop these defense systems and will be resistant. But we always have to be attentive to new diseases, new insect pests that are coming through globalization. So for now, it looks like we're going to have to live without ash trees. Emerald ash borer is just taking out virtually all ash trees. Back in the 50s and 60s, it was Dutch elm disease that was taking out our American elm trees.
Do we still have that?
We still have Dutch elm disease, and it still attacks American elm trees. But over the course of these decades, there have been a very close-knit, dedicated group of scientists that have worked to develop cultivars of elms that are resistant to Dutch elm disease. So in the near future, and even now as we speak, elm is being reintroduced into our urban landscapes that are resistant to Dutch elm disease.
Ah, good, good. We're nearing spring, or we're just about in spring. Is that a good time to plant trees?
Well, I can say that any time is a good time to plant trees. However, there are better times for some species and poorer times for other species. So there's nothing wrong with planting trees in the springtime, and that's kind of when we get our creative landscape energy charged up. And most people like to plant in springtime, and that's good. But people need to keep in mind that this is a very important time in the life cycle of trees. Trees are getting ready to spend a lot of energy on bursting out a new year of foliage for those deciduous trees. It requires a lot of energy. So if we're planting our trees in the springtime, right when they're spending a lot of energy, we need to be particularly attentive about their needs, especially water needs. So when trees are harvested from a nursery and then transplanted into a landscape, the problem is they lose an awful lot of their root mass. And this is the time of year that they're really requiring a lot from those roots in order to provide the necessary water and nutrients. So if we're going to plant in the springtime, we need to make sure that we provide those shrubs and trees with adequate water, especially as we move into summer and the dry season.
Is there a better time to plant trees?
Probably in general, for most trees and shrubs, the best time to plant is in late summer and in early fall. The reason that is that the trees are turning their energy away from growing and maintaining the foliage to growing and maintaining the root system. So if we're planting trees at the time of the year when we can encourage new root growth, that gives the tree all throughout fall and into early winter, and then again in early spring to develop those roots that the tree will need the following spring.
Let's talk a little bit about lawns. And we know we like them green, and that requires fertilization, I assume. Mm-hmm. Do you treat for grubs?
We do. And unfortunately, most of the evidence of the damage that grubs do occurs in the summertime. So what happens is the grubs, and these are grubs from insects like June bugs, the grubs are right now starting to feed in early spring on the roots of our lawns. That damage won't show up until later in the summer, and by that time, the grubs have already emerged from the turf as adult insects. So if we throw down a lot of insecticide to treat the grubs in the summer, the insects have already emerged and are missing. So it's good to have a lawn care specialist visit your lawn and look for grubs now, early in the spring, when we can still treat the grubs and solve the problem before it becomes evident.
Aha. And this is a great year for not having snow mold and other problems with lawns. But what about diseases? Are there things that we should be careful of?
Absolutely. And so much of the disease and insect problems that we face are very much linked to the climate. And so we have developed a product called the Nature Clock at the Davey Tree Expert Company. And the way the Nature Clock works is that we monitor the temperature of every single day throughout regions of North America. And because we're monitoring the temperature conditions, we can predict with a fair amount of accuracy when these plant pathogen problems and the insect problems are about to emerge. So we get ahead of the curve by understanding that the pathogens and the insects are related to the local climate. We monitor the local climate. We predict the emergence of these diseases and insect pests, and we start treating for those problems before they actually occur. And we can do so much more effectively by doing that.
Okay. The website for Davey Tree Expert Company has lots of good ideas, and there's a question and answer kind of thing on there. I found lots of good information. So when consumers go to Davey Tree Expert Company, they can get their questions answered right online. But I'm sure you're promoting that they call you and perhaps give you a little bit of business.
Absolutely. So at the Davey Tree Expert Company website, which is www.davey.com, you can type in your zip code or the name of your community and contact a local arborist.
Thank you, RJ. This is Ardith Keck for Forum 360.
Forum 360 is brought to you with support from Electric Impulse Communications, Kim and Harvey Nelson, Rubber City Radio Group, Acronist.com, Hudson Cable, Medical Mutual of Ohio, Forum 360 supporters, and the Shaw Jewish Community Center of Akron.